Welcome to another episode of Third Down Pulled. We've got another amazing guest this weekend. He's known as Rich. You may know him as Collectible Corner UK on socials. Been told he's one of Ben's favourite people, and he's known as Collectible Cowboy. Obviously, as you can tell through his hat. Let's start off. Why would Ben say you're one of your favourite people?
Delusional. That's the only thing I can assume. I don't know. Do you know what it is? Like I've known Ben for years, and honestly, one of the first people I always seek out at a card show. I think we both have the same cripplingly childish sense of humour. And just I don't know. But honestly, the feeling's mutual. Or you can ask anyone that will listen to me. Ben's one of my favourite people in the hobby as well. So the feeling's certainly mutual on that aspect.
I got that vibe from him as well when I first met him. But let's start from right at the start. How did you get into the hobby?
Getting into the hobby, honestly, it's a crazy story. I got back into the card hobby by a complete accident. And from where I am now is a very long way away from where we started getting back into it. And honest to God, I worked in effectively removals. I was buying out, like closing down shops and stuff like that. And one day I walked into a closing down hobbyist shop and it was full of like comics and old games and figures and stuff like that. And in the back corner of the storeroom was a load of old graded Pokemon cards. Now, I hadn't seen Pokemon cards since I was probably 6, 7 years old in the early noughties. And I was like, oh, bloody hell, these look different. Started having a look online and blew my mind that there was a value there. Started selling them, and then someone approached me saying, "Look, I've seen you're selling a load of these Pokemon cards. Do you want to buy my ones?" I was like, well, if I'm selling them, I might as well." Because it was effectively what I was doing anyway. I was buying stuff to sell it, and it kind of just started there. I didn't realize the card scene existed within the UK. I just thought I was just doing this, you know? And that was it. I started in the Pokemon world and we were buying and selling Pokemon cards, and that then started growing and growing and growing. I started doing it not as a business, but taking it a little bit more seriously. We had an online presence through Facebook. I think about 6 months later, maybe a year later, I attended my first show, which was an old school one in Brighton, back at the race. It was the race course at Brighton. There was a card show there. And that was my first ever show. And yeah, it kind of grew. I then moved into a streaming capacity. We were streaming on Facebook. We then moved on to TikTok. And then it just so happened that one day someone was like, you're selling all these Pokemon cards. Can you ever do football cards? And that was it. I said, well, yeah, let me see if I can find some and source some. Started selling football cards. And just as the customer base grew, it just became like 95% sports, and Pokemon seemed to just kind of leave. And what was weird is that place that kind of started us and kicked us off into the world of cards almost doesn't really exist for me anymore. I still dabble. I'm still never going to say no if a deal's good and stuff like that. But it really was a matter of, we're now a full-time sports card business. I was blessed. June of last year, I was able to leave my job. This has been my full-time job now for 18 months. And it's gone from finding literally like a bag for life of Pokemon slabs in a storeroom in a shop, to this being my full-time job, going to America, Europe, and stuff like that in the space of 4.5 years, maybe.
That's amazing. Obviously, you mentioned the shows. Before you got onto that, you picked up these Pokemon cards. How did you first start selling? Was that like an eBay? Did you go straight to eBay? Was there a different way you went around it?
It was, yeah, eBay and Facebook groups, because of what I'd been doing with the stuff that I already had. So when I was going in and buying out shops, I knew that there'd be collector groups for different things. So you just go and find your people, And I was logging in, I was searching Pokemon Facebook groups. I'm like, 100,000 users. What that? Like, blew my mind that it was even this big, because I wasn't even a Pokemon guy back in the day. Like when I was a kid, I was Yu-Gi-Oh! All right. So I wasn't even aware of how big Pokemon was. And what was crazy was I kind of just came back into it at a surge. And effectively it was that what I called the Logan Paul surge. When he came in and started talking about it big again, it was almost felt like he single-handedly rejuvenated the Pokemon world and rekindle it. And that was kind of as I came in. So I think my timing was lucky. And I'm sure in this podcast a few times we're going to talk about timing being one of the most important things in this hobby. So I was lucky in that aspect, and the fact that I just got to kind of ride that wave. As it grew, I was able to grow with it. And almost as it started to drop, I'd come out. again. So I almost like ride it to the top and came out at the right time. But yeah, no, it's Pokemon groups, a bit of eBay, stuff like that. And then obviously, yeah, progressing into the card shows. But a lot of it was all digital market, of course. I mean, even things like Facebook Marketplace was doing well for me to begin with when it was still so small.
You mentioned obviously timing. When someone came to you to sell them Pokemon cards, is that where you thought there's something here when it comes to selling?
Yeah, do you know what it was? It was that, and it was yes. I think that was when I thought, hang on, because my whole job beforehand had been buying to sell. It was flipping. It was cyclical. It was so Del Boy. Do you know what I mean? It was buy cheap, sell high. That was what life was. You know, when someone came to me and offered me these cards, and I think, he said, look, I think there's about 300 quid's worth of cards here. Give me 200 quid. And I was like, I'll take £100 for that. Yeah, go on then. And that was it. And it was just to what my daily life is now, where I get that message 30 times a day. The fact that someone had come to me to sell their stuff for less than it was worth. What? But they just wanted to get out of it, and you put the work in and you deal with all of that to sell it. It was mind blowing to me. But yeah, that was it. That was the moment where I thought, well, this is crazy. If there's someone out there that's wanted to sell me their stuff just to get it gone, there's going to be someone else as well. And then it was just a matter of finding those people. You build the reputation. The people you sell to then come back to you because you've sold them those cards. They then want to recoup some money, so they'll then sell you the others. And that's when you start doing all of a sudden doing the trades. And then now I start trading. They'll give me these 3 cards for that one card that they desperately want, and I can nick a bit on top. And that was literally it. That was just how the cycle started.
So yeah, obviously evolving. You mentioned going as a vendor at shows. Was that coming to it where it was like a dream to do that, or did it just like evolve into that because you were selling so much?
That was the reason I went to my first show was I've got far too much stuff and nowhere to put it, and I need to sell this. Joy was I'll draw a direct comparison. It was me going, when you like look around the house after Christmas and you're like, I can't wait for the car boots to start. That's what it was. It was a glorified car boot. It was like, I've got too much stuff. I just need to go and get it sold. How wrong was I as I'm now stood there, any money I take going back in because I'm buying again? And I think that was when I realised there was a lot more in this. I actually think the first time I saw this as rather than it just being a side hustle, if you like, a bit of stuff, I can make enough money that I can pay for a weekend away once a month or something like that. Not a weekend away, like a weekend out with the kids. It became there's actually a business model here. And if you can scale this up to a certain size, there's actually a living to be made doing this. When I started realizing that, not only is this now happening online, it's happening in person. Everywhere I'm going, that cyclical motion of cards coming in and coming out now exists. That was where it became quite interesting to me. And I think you're right. It was that first card show. I think like that light bulb moment.
So what's your inventory like now compared to when you first started?
Frightening, mate. Like I said, the inventory is crazy. Like, if I truly sat there and counted the value of everything I have in my possession, I think it would scare me. Genuinely. I've got individual cards worth more than my entire showcase at that first card show I went to. And to me, that blows my mind. Like, the fact that there's individual cards that are now worth more than when I first decided there's a business to be had here, I'm thinking I'm doing really, really well. You look back at it now, it's just, it's chalk and cheese. It's chalk and cheese, mate. It's a whole nother world.
Going back to the start, I think back to myself when I first started picking up cards, and I always thought to myself, it'd be so cool to sell as a vendor. And I thought, I've got to start off somewhere. I listed like 4 or 5 cards on eBay. No one bought them. It's a kind of bit disheartened. What tips would you suggest to someone who's like starting off? Because obviously you've probably got a similar path to where someone would like to go.
Yeah, I think when it comes to how do you get into what we do, it's tricky. And the thing I'll say at the moment is very saturated. I think in the last 6 months, I've seen more people coming in to trying to the card game than I have in the previous 4 years I've been in it. And that naturally automatically brings its blockers, because I think when you deal with something that's of such a high value product, we can talk about cards that are worth 4 and 5 figures quite comfortably. When people are wanting to part with that level of money, there comes, who am I parting that kind of money with? And I think that's one of the things new people struggle with. They can have the best inventory in the world. You need to accept patience comes with that, because having the right things to sell is important. Unfortunately, what I find a lot of the time is some people will enter a box break, they will hit a numbered card, and they'll go, brilliant, I'm going to sell this, just because it doesn't always have a value. And that's one of the things I think people struggle with the most in this hobby. Not everything has a value. It's perceived to be the case because we see so many transactions happening, but these are That's because there's so many cards. You know, your 299 Morgan Gibbs White isn't worth as much as you think it might be. You know, I'm sure to Mrs. Gibbs White, you know, or a diehard Nottingham Forest fan, that's great. But what people then need to remember is how many people out there collect Morgan Gibbs White. And of that one card you got, there's 298 others. And then there's 250 of a different color, and 199 of a different color, and 175 of a different color. And actually, your card to 299 is probably up there in like the twos or threes thousands of numbered rarity of that one image type. Let's not start talking about inserts and stuff like that. It's one of those where I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is assuming that every card has a value. When you're buying cards to sell, every card I buy with the intention of, right, who's my customer? You know, if someone walks up to me with something very niche, a lot of the time I just won't purchase it. But if someone's walking up to me with a player that I've never heard of, but it's a 2017 nobility on card, I'm buying that, because that's one of the most collected sets from true collectors in the hobby. So it just starts very, very quickly becoming making sure you know your audience and knowing your customer and what do they want before you start buying. If it comes to just liquidating stuff you've hit in breaks, it can be tricky. There's always going to be outs. There's people that will buy bulk number cards, bulk autos, X, Y, and Z all the time. But when it comes to start buying cards with the intention of selling them, you've got to be very, very conscious of who am I selling it to and why are they wanting to buy it? You know, do I buy that Erling Haaland auto? Well, yes, because Erling Haaland's probably top 3 strikers on the planet, has a massive collector base. He doesn't even play for a very collectible team, but people will collect the player. He's a future Ballon d'Or winner. You know, he's going to win multiple golden boots. He is one of the all-time strikers in the Premier League era. Yeah, it's very much being conscious of what you're purchasing, why you're purchasing it. And that's the biggest advice I can give to someone that's starting out. Don't just expect every card you have to sell, because that simply isn't the case. And even the experienced people make mistakes.
Obviously, great knowledge like that you've passed on there, you know, like to people. Because for me, someone that knows, I feel quite a lot about sports, is totally, just because I know loads about sports, is not the same when it comes to the trading cards, you know, like putting it into that. NFL, for instance, some quarterbacks sell way better than even the top wide receivers. Is that knowledge that you've picked up, is that just like learning from other people that you've picked up over time, or like going out yourself to shows and picking up that kind of knowledge, should I say?
Yeah, I think experience in the game, like there's some cards that sell way better than I personally ever would have thought have. You know, I'd like to think I'm pretty clued up on sport and things like that, and I use that to my advantage sometimes. You know, it swings and roundabouts, you know? So there's players in this hobby that I never thought necessarily would have that big a market until I was in the hobby. And the best example I use of that is Heung-min Son. He was like, he's a good player. He's a great player, in fact, but he doesn't play for a big national team, doesn't play for a big club, doesn't, you know, he's a good player. Crazy market. Because without doubt, he's Asia's greatest ever player. So as a result, you have one of the biggest card consuming continents. You know, the market in Japan, China, you know, places like that is humongous. Their greatest ever player, they want one. So as a result, Heung-min Son autos are crazy, crazy high. You compare that to another Spurs winger in Kulusevski, who I also think is a great player, by the way. He's worth 5%, 10% of the value. And that's where the card hobby market needs to come into it. That's where having a knowledge of sport is almost irrelevant. Because if you just want to go in on a knowledge of just sport, I think one of the best players of the last 10 years is Federico Valverde. I think the guy at Madrid is just unbelievable. He'll play in any position on the pitch, multiple Champions League winner. The guy's a world beater. It's worthless. You know, he's, in my opinion, probably one of the best midfielders of the last few years. No doubt at all. You can pick up his cards for tuppence. Things like Camavinga, World Cup winner, multiple Champions League winner. Diverse, he wins the league, wins Champions League, he's won international tournaments, everything you want to see. Can't give his cards away, you know? And that's where just having a knowledge of sport sometimes isn't enough, you know? And you need to be able to combine both things that you know. You know, when a new rookie card comes out, jump in, jump out. I've done all my deals with Rio, the young lad from Liverpool. When he scored that goal, you know, and everyone went crazy, I got in and out, did all of my deals, won't touch him now. People bring me Rio cards all the time, I'm not interested. Because that's now where, yes, his market's really high, But now I'm getting the football knowledge in there, and I'm like, how many youngsters do we see that are going to be world beaters are on loan at Preston North End next season? And that's, I don't know. I may make the wrong call there. I made the wrong call. I cashed out on Yamal. Sometimes I make the wrong call. Okay, Yamal's market's down right now, but it turns out I think he is actually the real deal. And those long-term rookie holds will come to fruition. I'm convinced they will. I'm 50-50 on Leonard Carl at the moment. I'm watching this 17-year-old kid scoring 3 consecutive Champions League games, and I'm thinking, am I going to miss another one here? Have I got to get in on Carl now? I don't know. But that's part of the fun of the hobby. It's not always just talking about the money. There has to be a fun element to it as well. And that's where I think it's almost like stocks and shares with your hobby. And you can combine your knowledge and maybe a bit of inside knowledge and what you think that player is going to be doing, getting in early, and then watch them grow. I've got a lot of Shea Lacey cards. I watch a lot of the Man United youth games. I've been waiting for Shea Lacey cards to come out for a long time. I have a lot of his first Bowman stuff. I picked up a lot of the stuff from these new sets because I think Shea Lacey is going to be the real deal. And that's where I'm taking my hobby and combining it with my business, and it can be a bit of a fun game.
Yeah. So it's a case of learning from experience, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Mate, we all make mistakes in this game. I'm not going to go into it too deeply. Let's just say my first personal collection was Mason Greenwood. All right? That was my first TC. It doesn't always go right. You got to learn from mistakes. That's the gamble and the risk of going in on a young footballer. You never know what's going to happen. Yamal could rupture his ACL. In two games' time, he could rupture his ACL and never be the same again. It's never a surefire thing in this hobby. And that's one of the biggest things you got to try and always make people aware of when they start investing big in rookies.
So obviously when selling, you mentioned obviously the knowledge which you've shared with us brilliantly. How important is it like building relationships when selling? I feel like a lot of people have told me that's one of the most important things when selling cards.
Absolutely. And I think I think that's really, really important because it comes back to one of the things I said before of like, who's my end customer? When I get to know these people that I see at every single show, there's a few people that I will leave cards back until they've come and see me because I've been able to pick up some really nice cards that I think they're going to want. I will then be able to hold those back until a point where they've been and seen me, and they'll be grateful because they know, there's one lad I know, he's a big Messi collector. So any big Messi autos or Messi case hits, he gets first shot at. And he's grateful for that. And as a result, I'm pretty sure he could probably argue with me on pricing a little bit, but he knows if I've given him a fair price, he'll just go, done, not an issue, And that's one of the big things. Relationships are key, and I think they're really, really important. And there's a few people in this game, and they'll all tell you exactly the same thing on that front.
I've seen loads of videos of people selling. I've actually never been to a show. It's something I want to do in 2026. I've seen like when people are actually selling, you've got people coming up to like say they're selling a card to you, but you've still got customers there. How important is that to like show enough time to the person you're buying off, but also trying to sell at the same time? It looks really difficult on camera.
It can be tricky. I find something like London Card Show, the best example I give actually was London Olympia a couple of weeks ago. We were just too deep at the table all day. And it sounds, I've got a queue of people going off to the right that are looking to sell to me. There's a queue of people going off to the left that are looking to buy. And bless her, it was the first show that my missus had come back to in about 2 years, just now the little one's big enough. And she was just like bringing cards up to like how much, I'm giving them a price. And then she's just having to go and deal with the selling. Because at the end of the day, I think it's really important. When someone takes time out of their day to bring something to you, they want something from me. The first thing they want is my time. The second thing they want is my money. All right? Now, transactions work both ways. I need to make sure that I'm giving them a fair value on money, but I need to make sure there's enough in it to make sense for me. At the end of the day, I'm not a charity, And I've always said, and sometimes people think it's unfair that the offers we make, and we offer 70%, 80%, or whatever it is. Some stores offer 50 to 60. They think that's crazy. Well, if you're best selling to a store, I know it's not your problem, but you're coming to them. They've got overheads, they've got rent, they've got all of these things. Anything they sell, they're paying VAT on. It's a massive list of costs that go into this. When you're coming to me at a show, I've had to pay to be there. A London example will cost me 600 quid, 700 quid to be there. That's before I've paid for my hotels, my travel, food. It can cost me £1,000 to be there. If I'm making 20% on your cards, it's very, very simple maths. I've got to sell £5,000 of stuff, making 20% just to get my £1,000 back. So you need me to do £5,000 worth of transactions for it to even make sense me being there, So that's one of the things people don't understand, and they think that maybe we're being unfair when we make these offers. It's a reason. But the advantage we give you is that instant cash out. You get to walk away from that table with cash in your hand, and you're done. There's no listing and photographing for eBay. There's no postage. There's no going to the postman. There's no, oh, my card didn't turn up, I want a refund. That doesn't, you're done. You've cashed out. So then my question I always ask people is, how much do you value your time? Is your time and effort in X, Y, and Z worth that 30%? I live and make my living on that 30%. That's what I value my time worth. That 30 to 20% depending on the card. I'll pay as high as 95% on some cards. The card's worth it, and it makes sense to us, but that's where we need to have those grown-up conversations. And that's why the time that we give you is important. Because I need to portray my side of things, you need to portray your side of things, and then the best deals happen was when two people act like grown-ups. We can look at the data that's there between us on what we have as evidence for this card, and then we can have a grown-up conversation and working out, right, what works best for both of us, and then we'll move on. And that's why I think we always do so well at shows, because I have that approach. I'm not very blunt, I'm paying this. It's like, let's have a conversation, find out the middle ground, and then work it from there. Sometimes it doesn't make sense for me to buy a card off them. Sometimes that doesn't work. And we shake hands and I smile and I want to see them at the next show. Sometimes they're not happy with my cash offer, and it's a card that I'll agree to take on consignment for them. I'm not actually outlaying the money myself, so I'm not pulling cash out of my cash flow, but I'll happily try and sell it for you for a much smaller percentage. That's where having these grown-up conversations work in working out what's best for you. And that's why it's so important to make sure people have the time at a show to be able to give it to them.
And people come up and like they might be selling you one or two cards, but there's some people that come up with big bundles to try and sell to yourself. Some people probably come up as well with maybe no prices in mind. What's the best way that they can go about to prepare you to make it a quicker transaction if the one were going to happen?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it really is. You give a great example there. At London just gone, I had a bloke walk up with a suitcase. I wish I was joking. It was selling his whole collection, and it was a suitcase full. That ended up being about a 3-hour deal. Like, we were just going for everything. And it got to the stage where I was just averaging. And we had a conversation. We were grown up. And we said, right, we'll do those cards £3 each. Those ones £5 each. Those ones. And we just kind of bang, 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 and got it done. But the best thing to do, the easiest way of getting a deal with a vendor is just have something in mind. Do your own research. Don't be too lazy. At the end of the day, you're coming to us and it's our job. But if you've got a card that is worth £100, you need to have done some research to know it's worth that. You can check loads of sites. Okay, a lot of us vendors use paid services like, Card Ladder Pro and stuff like that. I don't expect your average Joe to be paying 25, 30 quid a month to be able to comp cards. But you've got the advantage of things like 130 point. You've got eBay solds. Have an idea in your head what your card is worth. It's very, very easy to search up. And you can come to me and say, look, I've had a look online. I think this is worth about 100 quid. Would you give me £80 for it? That has skipped out the first 2 minutes of our conversation. I've got to do is go, do you know what? Yeah, I agree. It probably is worth that. He's maybe a little bit tight because he's not going to be the fastest move off. Would you do 75? Give me an extra fiver in case I need to list it online and that covers my postage. You can then say yes or no and jobs are good. But that's just my biggest thing is just have a little bit of an education when you come up to the table. Like, know roughly ballparks what you want to be. Know roughly what percentages you're willing to take. Because if you walk up and say, look, I want 90%, some of us, look, it's not there for me, so that's fair enough. And we can save everyone time, and that's a Billy bonus. But at the end of the day, just having a little bit of an idea, a lot of vendors at shows are going to pay between 60 and 90%, depending on the card. If it's going to be tricky for us to move, it's going to be on the lower end. If you're bringing me a Ronaldo auto, I'm going to be paying 90, 95% because it likely won't be there by the end of the day. Or, it's just going to be a nice, easy move for me. Things like that, So just having a rough idea on what you expect and things like that is going to be the best answer.
So obviously you sell at shows. When you first started, we mentioned selling Facebook deals. What were the transition like when you moved to obviously selling on TikTok, which is something I didn't know you could actually do? TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok was a weird one because I was doing streams on Facebook and we were literally doing this was still Pokémon. So we were doing rip and ships and I'd put up a Facebook post and I'd be on the live and it would have the prices of the packs and my PayPal. And people were literally sending through PayPal payments, and I'd have to keep refreshing my PayPal. And then it was a pain in the ass. But do you know what? It was good. It was pure. Part of me misses those days. It was so simple. I was less tired, that's for sure. Moving into TikTok was interesting, and do you know? I'd probably struggle to tell you what the actual trigger point was for me doing that. No. I remember I was lying in bed one day, just butt scrolling as you do. And I staggered across someone else selling Pokemon cards. And I even remember who it was. It was a company called Eve Trading. And they were on TikTok. And it blew my mind that they were doing what I was doing on an app that I spent so much time on. you know? And that kind of sparked the interest. And because I'd then found that it more appeared on my timeline, because I'd stopped and watched, the algorithm thought, oh, Rich wants this. And then I started seeing more and more. But when I went onto TikTok, there was 4 or 5 people on there, like card sellers. I honestly reckon I was probably like the 5th or 6th people on there. And I think all of the others are still there now, you know? Which is really, really cool. And, that was where we started. And that was it. We started going on. We started selling on there. It was very, very different. There was a lot more rules, but I like the automated shipping. I could just sell something and it just printed me a label. Game changer, And then once we'd been doing it long enough, a matey started turning up at the door to collect my parcels. Not just hanging sacks down to the post office anymore. So the little old lady behind the counter was so relieved when they started doing that. Her heart used to break when she saw me stood in the queue with all these sacks. But, it was really good. I enjoy selling on TikTok. It's definitely my preferred platform of choice. Obviously, there is others that people use. Whatnot does exist. I'm personally just not a fan of Whatnot. It's just not my cup of tea. But, I'm established on TikTok now. That's where we are. That's where we've always have been. It's where people know they can find me. So it's simple as that, really.
I'm probably showing my age. Like I only got into TikTok recently because I've always been like told by people that it's like a young person's platform. Have I been informed totally wrong?
So obviously, I think the first TikTok boom was COVID, wasn't it? And that was when TikTok really took off, and it was just full of people doing silly dances. But that was TikTok in its purest form back in the day. It's very much evolved. It's definitely not a young person's app anymore. I get a lot of my news from TikTok. I get a lot of my sports updates from TikTok. It actually kind of becomes a bit of a one-stop shop. Yes, there's childish videos that make me laugh. Yes, there's outrageous stuff that makes me go, but there's all sorts on there now. You get a lot more football highlights come from there. It's a really good like one-stop shop, and the TikTok shop itself is very, very good as well. It's like a combination of Amazon and Temu merge is TikTok shop for like its generic stuff, but you get the live streams, and the live streams are brilliant.
We mentioned this on the last podcast with Ewan when we had him on. Obviously, you go on Instagram, you've got YouTube. Is there different type of videos you use on different platforms, like that'll work well?
Yes and no. I mean, I am guilty that content creation has always been my worst aspect. I'm not good at content creation. I need to get better with it. I do upload very topical stuff to the TikTok, and the videos that go live are very topical. We talk about the lay of the land and stuff like that. But no, the TikTok, it seems to be very, very similar. So the content I upload there, I will also upload to my Instagram and things like that. But when it comes to content, I'm not the guy to ask, because it's my big thing. That's like my commitment to myself for 2026, is that content creation is going to get a lot better from me, because it's so important. It is. And it's not just in this hobby that we do. In the world we live in today, the most valuable currency is attention. I truly believe that, and that works in every single aspect of anything. The most valuable currency we can offer is attention, and any way that you can gain and grab attention is vital. And you do that through engaging content. Look at advertisement today compared to others. It's gone. It's just a whole nother world. Um, However you need to do it, however you get attention is good, really. I mean, I always think the best people at it are people like Ryanair. They get your attention because you laugh at them, and then you share that joke with their friends. People can make complaints and they go, so. That is amazing marketing and advertisement, because it gets your attention because you laugh at it and you share it with your friends. It's not advertising at all, but it is. And that's the world we live in today, and that works purely through the world of attention.
You can probably guess where this next question came from, but we need to ask, where can we find your videos of your TikTok dances?
So, well, as long as the card game keeps working, we'll be okay. But if the card game ever dries up, I will be sure to share exactly where you can find the pictures of and videos of me dancing.
And also, we're aware of a potential calendar in 2026.
Fingers crossed we don't get to that stage, but needs must.
Yeah, we'll leave that for another day. We mentioned obviously grading. Like when I looked through like your content, you've got some amazing content on there. Came across the graded ticket for England-Greece with the David Beckham free kick, and someone who's so new to the hobby was just getting his head around just grading cards. To be honest with you, seeing a graded ticket, tell us about that.
Well, graded tickets is probably the fastest growing area of my business. It's the one that I think I probably enjoy the most. Obviously, the problem is nowadays there's no such thing as a ticket. There's a QR code on your phone, and whether you're going to Wembley, whether you're going to a concert, you just scan a QR code. And that breaks my heart, because where I love the tickets so much, I know that doesn't exist anymore. And I've always said there's so many incredible moments in history that you say, oh, I wish I could have been there. And sometimes physically you can't. But having owned something that was, I think, sometimes quite special. So you talk about the favorite ticket. I mean, my favorite ticket that I own is actually this one. It's the 1966 World Cup final. So I'm not even 30 years old. There's no way I'm going to have been there at the World Cup final in '66. But as an England fan, that for me is an incredible thing to own. The fact that ticket got someone that was there into that game. Some people don't get it. Some people really do. I see tickets selling for tens of thousands of dollars for big events in the US. A lot of it still pins down to those big US sports. I saw one the other day, and it was a ticket for the match where Babe Ruth hit his first ever World Series home run. $1,000
Wow.
that I went for. And one of the things I like about tickets is that one-of-one Superfractor Messi that was printed. Incredible thing. Big money card. Panini could print another one if they wanted to. Obviously they won't, but the fact that they've printed it once, they could print it again at any time. They're still going to have the design saved and the machinery and everything like that. These tickets are true one-offs, because only one ticket for that game was ever printed and for that seat number at that day, that is the only one in the world. So for me, every single ticket is a one of one. And that's one of the things I love. And I've had some incredible ones over the years. I've had an Istanbul, '05 Istanbul, Liverpool versus Milan, signed by Steven Gerrard. That is an incredible thing. And there's a few tickets that I want to try and get my hands on. Another one that I've got that's really cool isn't just sports tickets. I've ventured into other things. I've got things for movie premieres. I've got the Wolf of Wall Street movie premiere ticket. To me, that's just a cool thing. And this is another one of the things that me and Ben connect really well on. We just like cool stuff. And
Yeah.
for me, that's the definition of something cool. I've got a ticket to the royal wedding of Charles and Diana, hand signed by Lord Chamberlain as a personal invite into the chapel for the wedding. It's history. And that's just a cool thing to own. So for me, tickets are very, very neat. I've got other ones. I've got cheaper ones. I've got some of the tickets I've got on me now. I've got that famous Darren Bent beach ball goal, where he went off the beach ball and went in against Liverpool. That's just
Liverpool,
a
yeah.
cool thing for me. I think I'm selling that for it's like 30 quid. But it's just, do you know what? For someone who's a Liverpool fan or something, it's just a cool thing to have. And there's literally just some of the tickets we have, Eric Cantona's Man United debut. I've got Lampard's Chelsea debut. We've got Wayne Rooney's angry volley, that worldie where he was arguing with the ref against Newcastle, and then went and just smashed it in. An unbelievable goal. We got a ticket from that one. And the thing I love is that of the 40,000 people in St James's Park that day, how many of them threw their ticket out on the way out or left it in their jeans to wash it? They're not been preserved. So for me, that all these tickets that are one of ones anyway, because it's the only one for that seat on that game, they're really cool. They're niche. I just love tickets. You can tell by the way I talk about them. I just think it's something really cool. And there's a few I've got my eyes on and I want to try and get, but you start getting into the crazy, crazy world.
Ben's brought me something now. Do you remember that?
There we go. Do you know what? When I said that we connect on cool stuff, in my back of my head, I knew that was going to come out. The on-card Andy Reid inscription. He's like self-portrait of Andy Reid. I love that. The second he saw that, I'm like, there's no way he's going home and not having that today. And yeah, this is what I mean. There is, as much as you can have that die-hard, I want to collect, sometimes you can have fun with it. And, things like my Wolf of Wall Street movie premiere ticket and stuff like that, I think is a really fun way of collecting within this hobby as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. These are the new things to me. It's just becomes so cool when I hear stories like that, because I've obviously just got into trading cards and there's so much other stuff out there you can get graded and just collect. As collectibles, you can just sit down and talk about all these amazing things. It's just, you sit there for hours. It's so cool. But you mentioned like the tickets and things you've got. How does that come to when you come to selling them? How do you get, like, obviously when you've got a card, you can go price it. How do you go about making a price for a ticket if you're about to sell it, or anything, I suppose, like that?
No, genuinely, that's a really good question. It's always one of the trickiest things. And because it's such a small market, it comes to interpretation. Sometimes there is comps. The most expensive ticket I have has some really nice comps, and that makes life easy. And I've got a Caitlin Clark WNBA debut in a PSA 10. Now, trying to get tens in a ticket is unheard of, by the way. But, that's nice and easy because US sports is a little bit easier. Everyone knew about Caitlin Clark long before she ever drafted, you know? So that was always going to be a thing. And naturally, there's quite a lot of those because everyone who went that day knew what they were going to. It's not like you could have gone to that random Arsenal game all those years ago and this young 17-year-old kid called Marcus Rashford, who none of you have ever heard of, is walking on the pitch, So there's going to be a lot less of those Rashford ones, even though it's a less significant than the Caitlin Clark. It's tricky. And a lot of the time it comes down to interpretation. You've got some evidence on what raw ones can sell for. It's then based on condition and obviously significance. One of my favourite ones that I have at the moment is Zinedine Zidane's Real Madrid debut. That's a big ticket. That's one of the greatest players of the last half a century debuting for the club that he's synonymous with. That naturally is going to be an awful lot more than Darren Bent knocking a ball in off a beach ball. So it comes down to interpretation a lot of the time. It's knowing what you've paid. And a lot of it's what it's worth to the collector. The thing is no one walks up to your table and, have you got tickets? What happens is they're looking at the cards and they go, what the hell are these? And the best example I saw of one the other day was there was a Wigan fan and he found the ticket I had for the FA Cup final against Man City. He's like, name your price. How much? Like, I need it. Like, I need that. And he's showing me he's got the Wigan tattoo on his leg and everything. I'm like, mate, I know you need that. Pay it what it costs. Give me 40 quid, it's yours. But that's roughly what it cost. The ticket was about 20 quid. They were about 20 quid to get them graded, stuff like that. So things like that. I was like, just get it gone. Because I know you need it. And to be honest, this comes back to knowing my customer. Who else wants that? City fans don't want it. And how many Wigan fans are there that I know enjoy? Trying to find your customer, right? It's a bit of a tricky one. And in that instance, I did find my customer. I maybe made a 5 or a 10 or something like that. It wasn't a lot on that one, but it made someone happy. And that's another thing that's important. A lot of the time it comes down to interpretation, the significance of the game based off of other ones that you've sold, knowing the roughly, it's experience in the game again, knowing what these kind of things move for.
Do you think that's something that we might see more at card shows in the future? Of course, I haven't been to one, so I don't know what exactly there, but it feels like when I've watched videos, it's mostly cards. But if you go over to America, you see all the different variety of signed memorabilia and just cool stuff like you mentioned. Is that something we might see more of over here, or do you think there's a gap there?
I hope so, but I think it will take a very long time because the UK card hobby is decades behind the America. Decades. And I think the UK card scene is still trying to establish itself. I think that before we start getting other things, you'll have people like me that bring them along, and I do think there is a day in 10, 15 years' time where people do see a graded ticket and go, wow, that's crazy. But they're expecting to see it a little bit more. And I think the fact that as people do see them more and more, and people like me bring them, there's a couple of other guys in the UK that deal with them as well. But I think what you'll find is that as they become more accepted, I think their value is actually going to skyrocket because people will appreciate that actually everything is a QR code nowadays. Cards will be printed every year, but things like this, there is a big argument in that it's not really got a place in the card scene. It is more sports memorabilia. That I perfectly agree with, but I do think there is that strong enough connection between them. I sold Harry Kane's Spurs debut ticket with a Harry Kane rookie card. People do still want them together, it looks good in a collection of cards, I've got a 1999 Champions League final ticket, and I've also got on the same shelf the 11 starting players for Man United that day in that final. For me, that ticket just elevates that whole display, that collection. So I think there will be a place, and I think it will slowly grow as people maybe understand the rarity and actually start thinking it's maybe a good time to start getting involved with them.
We touched a bit on your personal collections that you've got, which is incredible, the variety. Obviously, NFL, NBA, soccer. Is there specific players you go for? Is it just, like you mentioned, is it just cool stuff that you want to look at and have on your walls?
Yeah. I've been very unlucky with PCs. My first ever PC, as we said, was Mason Greenwood. That fella died of death. The biggest one I've ever went in was there was a young lad that I was watching in the under 18s for Man United, had a phenomenal youth FA Cup run, got his debut, and I thought, yeah, you're the next big thing. So I started investing very heavily in Garnacho to the tune of 5 figures, like comfortably, rookie Garnacho cards, everything. Well, as a Man United fan now, that's great. I love him, don't I? He's a great bloke. So that's kind of back for, and it's a bit, and again, but this is the lessons you learn. I invested too much into a rookie. You can invest in a rookie, but go within your means. Every penny I had for PC over the space of about 3 years went into that one thing. And it's bit me in the ass. I've got the biggest hands up because right now, no Man United fan will touch him. Chelsea fans don't really want a Man United card on their shelf. And he's not really done anything at an international level yet. So it's kind of, I'm a bit stuck with a big value of a PC and not a lot. So that was a big hit that I took with those. Kind of made me reassess my PC and where I wanted to go. I do just keep collecting my cool stuff every now and again. A lot of my PC is made up of tickets and stuff like that. I've got a really nice growing WWE collection, but I only collect like my goats and stuff like that. So, I've got, and what I'm trying to do is like one card for each person. And if I can get a nicer one, I'll replace the one I've got. So at the moment, I've got like a National Treasures to 10 on card John Cena auto. I've got a to 5 PSA 10 Edge. We've got a on card rookie auto for Rhea Ripley. I've got a to 5 PSA 10 to Mind Blank Trish Stratus. I said Tiffany Stratton. They are similar. I'll get let myself off. Trish Stratus and stuff like that. So I try and just do one of each, and then if I can get a better one, I'll upgrade that one card. And then what I've tried to do as well is consolidate all the smaller cards I had into some big ones. So like the biggest purchase I've ever made of an individual card was this, but it's a Cristiano Ronaldo Eminence on card auto. Crazy card. So all the Ronaldo cards I did have, I sold to put into that one, and I've now got a big Messi. I've got a grade 8 rookie Messi. I've got that for my Ronaldo, and I'm now working on just upgrading my Pele and Maradona. And that's what I kind of want to try and do is maybe have like my 4 or 5 soccer guys, my 4 or 5 WWE guys, and my tickets, and then just try and upgrade the individual cards. Because what I saw was what I did with my Garnacho collection. I went too big, too hard. I've probably got 200 cards, more than that even, of crazy values in each. And like I said about Yamal, just needs an ACL. All it needs is a player to develop an attitude, and you've got someone he thinks he's got the ability of Cristiano Ronaldo, but for reality, he's got the ability of Gemma Collins. And, all of a sudden, he's alienated an entire fan base, and his new fan base isn't desperately a fan, and I'm just sat here with all these cards like, great. So I think rookies are a great investment just in drabs,
Obviously you mentioned, I don't want to touch on it too much, but like when you've mentioned like buying young players before they've like broke onto the scene, do you like have that role as like, I'm going to put them in my PC, but also I could sell them if they go for ridiculous amounts, if they do really well, should I say?
That was always my intention with Garnacho. I think it all comes down to short hold and long term. So short term and long term holds. Rookies, I think the way I view rookies is short term holds. I try and get in. Once they establish themselves and they appear they're going to be very good, that's when I would personally cut out. Now, don't get me wrong. If you hold on for the very long term, it can be very, very affluent. Look at Mbappe rookies now. Haaland's first year cards. They're already going crazy. Is it 17, 18 chrome for Mbappe? So just like refractors in a PSA 10, silver refractor PSA 10, 4-figure card for a silver, It can be crazy. My intention was always, I wanted to buy Garnacho, wanted him to establish, get a big move abroad, because that was always his intention, was to try and get that big move to a Barca or a Madrid, something like that, and sell then. Because what we learnt with Bellingham's peak value was the summer he was linked with Madrid. He moved to Madrid, his market died. And that was it. It dropped. It dropped probably 50% in a week of him actually making that move, which surprised me. And again, was something you learn within the hobby, is the best time to sell is in the hype, not in the result, if that makes sense. I'm sure if Bellingham goes on to have an incredible World Cup with us, wins a Champions League, wins the World Cup with us, and is nominated for the Ballon d'Or, I'm sure those cards will return to where they were. But right now, everyone that sold their Bellinghams in the hype is the ones that have done the best out of this deal. And the long-term holders are still having to hold out to see what comes to fruition. My long-term holds now are going into GOATs. Messi's, Ronaldo, Pele, Maradona are the 4 places that I'm starting to put money, stuff that I have no intention of selling. Pele, Maradona autographs, no more are being made for obvious reasons. Ronaldo hasn't seemed to sign for quite a while now. It's been a long time since we've seen a set with a Ronaldo auto in. They're becoming harder and harder. So for me, the long-term holds are the legends. If you want to the short-term flip. So people that got into Estival early, brilliant. Start selling your Estivals now because the hype price has gone mental. The biggest example I've seen recently was Fermin Lopez. Some people that bought into Fermin Lopez, you could pick up Fermin Lopez autos for £3, £5, £10. Nothing. He went and scored that hat trick, and I'm seeing base autos go for like 60, 80 quid. That would never, you'd never get that 2000x on a card when it comes to the legends. But the thing is because the legends have already made their move, they're already expensive. It's going to cost you £1,000 to get into a Messi autograph. In 10 years' time, it'll probably be worth 2,000. I don't think you ever lose on that card. So I think it's that like stability in the old boys versus the volatility in the young market. It just depends how you want to play the game. It's like buying. It's like crypto. Are you buying Bitcoin or are you buying meme coin? There's money to be made in meme coin, but there's also a lot of money to be lost. If you just want something stable, you're not going to make it rapidly, but just put it in Bitcoin. Yeah. That's the way I view those.
Obviously, you've shared this amazing journey with us. Incredible where you've started from to where you are now. What's the future hold for Collectible Corner? Have you have a plan in 2026, or is it just winging it and see what happens?
No, we do have a plan. 2026 is going to be big, I think. We're getting across to the States for the first time for a card show in February. We're also going back to Italy for card shows, back to Germany, Spain. We're at Dublin in February as well. So we're branching out of just the UK. I think, like I said, where the UK is still very much establishing its card scene, to continue that growth, you need to go outside of the UK. We've been talking to quite a few people in Dubai recently and stuff like that as well. So there's a lot happening, and, we're going international, shall we say. There's real hopes where we're moving house end of Q1 this year in 26, and the plan is to open a brick and mortar shop where it is we're moving. So that is the plan as that stands at the moment. So that'll be good to see if we can actually get that to fruition. We'd like to see that happen. Obviously, we understand if not. But also, we're going to be reintroducing Pokemon to Collectible Corner again. I feel like it's such a big thing that sounds like a dreadful term, but you're leaving too much money on the table by not doing it. It's so big. You look at any card show ever, I'm pretty confident I could go to somewhere like Reading. What day will be on Tuesday? If we remove it being the Christmas period, I'm pretty sure I could put on Facebook today on Tuesday and say, or whenever day this comes out, it's probably not going to work, is it? But you know what I mean? Let's say it's a Tuesday, and I could put up on Facebook and go, I'm doing a card show this Sunday. There's 50 tables. Here are the tickets. I could sell all 50 of those tables and tickets within those 5 days because Pokemon is that big. That's something people don't realize, is that people think the sports world is big in the UK. I honestly think 5% as big as what the Pokemon world is still. And, maybe sometimes you don't see them because you don't cross over. But when you start going to card shows that have both present, you see the difference. And that's a big thing that I think. So we're going to be reintroducing Pokemon. We're going to be going abroad a lot. We've got more streamers coming on working for us across different platforms. There's a lot happening. It's going to be a very, very busy year. I'm tired already.
I just want to finish on one question, maybe some advice for new people, especially like myself. Obviously, I buy a few cards, but I don't have the means of some other people. What advice would you give to someone who maybe don't have the time and the money to really enjoy the hobby and collect? What advice would be the best?
My best advice is collect what you want, not what you're told. And that is a big thing for me. And I get really annoyed when I see other people, don't buy that. It's not right. For me, if you are a collector, you buy what you like. One of my good mates in this hobby, he's a big diehard Fulham fan. He has one of the best Fulham collections I've ever seen. He has one of the best card collections I've ever seen. The amount of one-of-ones and everything he's got, because they're cheap and easy to attain for him, because not everyone collects Fulham. But that's because he collects what he wants. He's probably got well within the means to be collecting Ronaldo, Messi, Zidane, Henry, whoever he wants. But he doesn't. He collects what he wants, and as a result, he's got a collection that he genuinely loves. He'll never sell those cards. I just don't see a world in which he would, because he doesn't need to. Because there's too much pressure on people to try and get the big cards. If that comes, amazing. But the problem is the only people that they see in this game are the ones that are on the screen. They're the ones that have got the social media presence. They're the streamers. They're the things like this. They're operating in a world where the money is different. They're using business money, not personal money. It's not a collection. And that's my big thing I say to people is never be ashamed of your collection, because everyone started somewhere once. I still have all of my shootout booklets. from back when I was a kid in 2007, 2008. Complete sets, 100 Club Rio Ferdinand. I jumped around the room. You know, like, because that was what I collected. That was when it was pure to me. You know, anything I collect nowadays almost feels almost false because I've got the means to source it. So that's my big thing. With someone getting into this game, collect what you want to collect. You know, if you like the look of that silver pulsar Joshua Kimmich, because it's a funky looking card and he was your favorite player in the last year's FIFA, and that's what you want, buy that card. So what? It's a £2 card. They're designed to look good and you like it. Just because someone else looks at it and goes, that's a them problem. So that's my biggest advice is collect what you want, not what you're told. And I really, really mean that when I speak to people that are trying to get into this hobby. There's too much pressure on people that come into this hobby to try and get too big too quickly. Enjoy it. And if you get lucky enough to add something big to your collection, amazing. And it can maybe snowball from there. But ultimately, this is a hobby first and foremost. You're supposed to enjoy a hobby. There shouldn't be pressures on it.
I really appreciate that. Some amazing advice, Rich. And thank you for jumping on today and talking us through your journey and your personal collection. I think I'm going to take a lot from it. One thing that sticks out to me straight away is when I'm walking around the card booths with my wife, instead of looking for trading cards, maybe looking for some tickets and things like that, see if anyone's has anything on there. So that's one thing I've definitely stands out to me. But yeah, really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll definitely do that again. And hopefully I can meet you at a show, my first show, maybe one time next year.
I'd love that. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate that. See you again soon.
See you soon.